Hey my dear listener, before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment down where are you from and what's your time right now. Let's jump into the video. Story 1. The Yule Feast, Survival and Celebration in Northern Europe. You are in a small village somewhere in Northern Europe, perhaps along the edge of a dense pine forest, sometime in the 11th century. Snow drifts silently over thatched roofs, blanketing the ground in a cold, glittering hush. The wind howls through the skeletal branches of the trees, rattling the timbers of your home, and inside the hearth sputters, struggling to keep its small, life-giving flame alive. This is winter as it always was, harsh, relentless, and unforgiving. For most of the year, your survival depends not just on skill, but on preparation. The Yule season, spanning from late December to early January, is a momentary relief from the struggle of daily life, a time for warmth, food, and community, but even this festival is inseparable from survival. The Yule feast at its heart is both celebration and strategy. In a time when refrigeration is non-existent and the snow makes travel treacherous, the winter feast is a culmination of months of planning. Cattle, pigs, and chickens have been raised with an eye toward this moment. Grains, root vegetables, and preserved meats stored in cool, dark cellars, and mead and ale have been brewing patiently since autumn. Every item on the table reflects a careful consideration of survival. Your ancestors understood that winter was a test. Food was more than sustenance, it was insurance, a hedge against the months when the land lies dormant. On the night of the winter solstice, or Yule, the villagers gather around the communal hall or the largest hearth available. Smoke rises from chimneys into the crisp night air, mingling with the scent of burning pine boughs. The hearth is not merely decorative, it is central to life itself. Here, meat roasts slowly on spits and stews bubble in cauldrons, the heat helping to drive out the biting cold. In a typical household, the meal might include salted pork or dried fish, boiled cabbage, turnips, and leeks, sometimes supplemented by grains in the form of barley bread or porridge. These foods are chosen not for flavor alone, but for their ability to sustain you. Calories and warmth, rather than culinary sophistication, dictate the menu. The Yule feast is also a social ritual, a way of reinforcing communal bonds that are essential for survival. Villagers exchange small gifts, often homemade trinkets, carved wooden figures, or preserved foods to reaffirm alliances and friendships. In these harsh months, mutual support can mean the difference between life and death. A neighbor's generosity in sharing a portion of preserved meat, or in helping repair a roof damaged by snow, is not merely courteous, it is a lifeline. The feast becomes a rehearsal for endurance, a collective reaffirmation that the community will survive the winter together. Children dressed in layers of wool and furs huddle near the hearth, wide-eyed as elders recount tales of past Yules. These stories are not grand heroic epics, they are practical accounts of survival. How old Lars managed to trap a fox despite the snowdrifts, or how Marin's quick thinking prevented the stored grain from spoiling during a sudden thaw, are the tales that resonate most. Every story carries a lesson, an understanding of the land, the animals, and the unforgiving cycle of the seasons. The oral tradition is itself a form of survival knowledge, passed from one generation to the next, hidden in the guise of entertainment. Lighting is another carefully considered aspect of winter survival. Before candles and glass windows were widespread, villagers relied on fires and rushlights. These were simple torches made from dried rushes soaked in animal fat, providing just enough light to see around the hearth. During Yule, additional torches or evergreens soaked in resin might be lit to extend the hours of daylight, creating a symbolic victory over the darkness that dominates the winter months. You can almost feel the psychological relief that these flames bring, a warm defiance against the encroaching night. Food preservation for the Yule feast required meticulous preparation months in advance. Salting and smoking meat, drying fruits, and storing root vegetables in underground pits or cool cellars ensured that even during the bleakest periods, sustenance would not fail. The processes were time-consuming and labor-intensive, but they were critical. A poorly preserved batch could lead not only to hunger, but to illness and even death. Every slice of dried meat, every barrel of ale, is a testament to planning, patience, and knowledge passed down through countless winters. Survival here is less about luck and more about diligence. As the night wears on, the Yule feast shifts from survival to celebration. Singing and drumming, sometimes dancing, punctuate the evening. Even in cold, dark times, humans have always found ways to mark the turning of the seasons. The music may be simple, a few drum beats or the strum of a lyre, but it provides rhythm, a heartbeat against the long night. Singing also serves a practical purpose, maintaining warmth and morale. Vocal activity generates heat, and communal participation reinforces social bonds, reminding everyone that they are not alone against the winter's harshness. Yet even amidst warmth and abundance, the specter of scarcity remains. You are aware that outside the hall, snow may drift over half-buried fences, that wolves may prowl, and that a failed harvest can make the next season perilous. The feast is temporary, a momentary reprieve before the struggle resumes. You cannot forget the lessons of the seasons: rationing, vigilance, and cooperation. Survival is never guaranteed. It is something you negotiate with the environment every day, every hour. As the Yule night deepens, the stories, songs, and shared meals begin to wind down. Some villagers may slip away quietly to check on stored supplies or to tend to animals left in the barns, knowing that survival is a 24-hour responsibility. Others linger near the hearth, reluctant to let the warmth fade, reflecting on the passing year and the uncertain months ahead. The Yule feast is both an ending and a beginning, a ritual acknowledging the present and preparing for what is yet to come. And yet, in the midst of the revelry, a question lingers in your mind. Even with careful planning, communal support, and centuries of accumulated knowledge, how does a community truly measure its resilience against a winter that can stretch beyond imagination? How many of these small victories, meals successfully preserved, stories recounted, fires kept alive, are enough to safeguard a village when nature turns suddenly and mercilessly against you? The answer is uncertain, and in that uncertainty lies the quiet tension that accompanies every Yule night. Survival is never guaranteed, and yet life persists. The morning after the Yule feast is quieter, though no less intense in its demands. You awaken to a village still blanketed in snow, the frozen landscape refracting the pale winter sunlight. Outside, smoke rises in thin ribbons from chimneys, each a lifeline in the unyielding cold. While the previous night was devoted to warmth and celebration, now attention shifts to practicalities, the mundane, persistent tasks that ensure the survival of your household, and by extension, the entire village. This is the rhythm of northern winters. Brief moments of festivity punctuating long periods of preparation, vigilance, and endurance. The work begins with tending to the animals, the lifeblood of the village during winter. Cattle and pigs are kept close to the stables to conserve heat, and hay is rationed carefully as stores are finite. Chickens and ducks must be fed, water must be prevented from freezing, and any newborn animals require constant attention. You realize with a quiet respect that the Yule feast celebrated the very life that these animals provide: salted pork, dried venison, and preserved eggs. Without careful management, there would be no food to celebrate with, no meat to sustain you through the months when hunting and foraging are nearly impossible. While you tend to the livestock, you think about the labor that went into preparing for this season. Autumn was a time of relentless work, harvesting grain, slaughtering animals, smoking meat, digging storage pits for root vegetables, and brewing ale or mead. The Yule feast is not merely indulgence, it is the reward for survival planning. Every step from harvesting to storage was a calculated move in a complex strategy to withstand the harsh months ahead. Knowledge of seasonal cycles, of frost patterns, and the behaviors of local wildlife becomes essential. The villagers' survival depends not only on hard work, but on wisdom passed down through generations. The communal hall or longhouse is still warm from the previous night, but attention now turns to the practical aspects of the structure itself. Roofs must be checked for snow accumulation, walls inspected for cracks that let in drafts, and the hearth maintained meticulously. Firewood is rationed to balance warmth with availability. Burning too much at once may leave the village exposed during a prolonged cold snap. You notice the precision with which the villagers handle this task. A split log here, a handful of kindling there, always calculating how long a single fire will last. Winter, in this context, is a constant negotiation between scarcity and comfort. Food preservation continues as a central concern. Barrels of salted meat are rotated, dried fish checked for spoilage, and grains inspected for moisture or infestation. Root vegetables, turnips, parsnips, and carrots are stored underground in pits lined with straw, each carefully monitored. Spoilage is not merely inconvenient, it is potentially catastrophic. Every spoiled item represents calories lost, meals foregone, and greater strain on the remaining stores. You reflect on how much of medieval life revolves around careful attention to these often boring details: rotating barrels, tending pits, scraping mold off a root, but recognize that these tasks are literally matters of life and death. Beyond these immediate concerns, there is the subtle strategy of managing energy and morale. Villagers pace themselves, understanding that even minor overexertion can lead to frostbite or exhaustion. Daily routines are meticulously planned. The coldest part of the day is reserved for tasks that must be done outside, while afternoons, when sunlight is more generous, are devoted to indoor work. Children are kept close, learning by observation as much as instruction. Every chore, no matter how dull, carries lessons: how to build a fire quickly, how to recognize signs of illness in livestock, how to preserve food efficiently. Survival in this context is a form of education, imparted quietly but rigorously. Storytelling also resumes after the feast, now with a more utilitarian purpose. Elders recount the previous year's misfortunes as cautionary tales: the winter when a sudden thaw flooded the root pits, or the year when a wolf killed half a village's herd. Children listen, wide-eyed, absorbing not only the narrative but the lessons embedded in it. In these quiet evenings by the hearth, cultural memory merges seamlessly with practical instruction. Superstition intertwines with survival knowledge. Rituals are observed not only for piety or tradition, but because they embody strategies to influence the uncertain elements of winter, from weather patterns to animal behavior. One particular ritual involves the Yule log itself, a massive piece of oak or ash, carefully selected and transported to the longhouse or central hearth. The log is more than a symbolic centerpiece. Its slow, controlled burn provides sustained heat over several days. Ash from the log is collected and sometimes used in fields as fertilizer, closing a cycle that connects warmth, sustenance, and survival. The ceremonial breaking and lighting of the Yule log is a vivid example of how medieval communities intertwined ritual with practical necessity. Every symbolic gesture, decorating with holly, draping evergreens, or hanging carved wooden figures, carries an embedded layer of utility. Outside, the frozen landscape challenges even the most prepared villagers. Hunting in deep snow is laborious and dangerous. Wolves and other predators become bolder as their usual prey dwindles. Travelers face treacherous roads, rivers frozen unevenly, and the omnipresent threat of frostbite. You think about how Yule, with its communal feasting and gift-giving, is also a time to strengthen alliances and maintain social cohesion. Sharing food, exchanging knowledge, and consolidating labor are strategies to increase collective survival. What seems at first glance like simple festivity is, in fact, an essential layer of resilience against the harsh northern winter. As days pass, the rhythm of survival becomes evident. Each morning is a calculated sequence of tasks: checking stores, tending animals, maintaining the fire, monitoring the weather. Afternoons may allow for minor indulgences or repairs. Evenings are reserved for communal warmth, storytelling, and reflection. In this slow, repetitive cycle, the villagers cultivate both practical skill and psychological endurance. It is a rhythm designed not for excitement or adventure, but for the quiet preservation of life itself. And yet, despite meticulous preparation, despite knowledge accumulated over generations, uncertainty persists. You cannot control every element. A sudden thaw could ruin stored grain, a predator could breach the village defenses, or a long blizzard could exhaust food supplies faster than anticipated. The question remains, even with careful planning and communal cooperation, what happens when winter tests its harshest limits? Can a village withstand months of unrelenting cold, or will the forces of nature ultimately overwhelm human effort? It is this unresolved tension, the constant negotiation between preparation and unpredictability, that defines the Yule season. Even after the feasting ends, the work continues, and the shadow of the long winter looms, challenging every skill, every lesson, every measure of human resilience. The nights have grown longer still, stretching across the village like a soft, unbroken shadow. The Yule feast is over, the fires are carefully maintained, and the daily routines of survival have settled into their steady rhythm. Yet winter is far from conquered. Snowdrifts pile high against the walls, the wind tears at rooftops and shutters, and the village's well-worn paths are almost invisible beneath the white. This is the climax of the cold season, the period that truly tests the endurance of every individual, every family, and the community as a whole. The lessons of the Yule feast carry through in this critical phase. Food stores are now carefully rationed, every scrap accounted for. Barrels of salted meat are divided among households, and portions are monitored so that no family suffers unduly. You watch as villagers adjust their diets in response to scarcity. Stews are stretched with grains and root vegetables, meat is shaved thin, and even bones are boiled to extract every calorie and nutrient. These practices are unremarkable in appearance, simple, monotonous, and at times tedious, but they are essential. Survival depends on the quiet discipline of the mundane. Winter work is equally unglamorous but vital. The stables are tended multiple times daily. You notice the villagers shoveling snow from roofs to prevent collapse, breaking ice in troughs to provide water, and reinforcing doors with extra planks. Every action, no matter how repetitive, reduces risk. Here, small errors carry consequences. One frozen water source could mean the loss of livestock. One neglected roof could lead to structural damage and exposure. The Yule celebrations are remembered as a temporary respite, but the real challenge lies in these ongoing efforts to withstand nature's extremes. In the evenings, the communal hearth becomes a center of reflection and teaching. Elders recount tales of past winters, mixing cautionary lessons with subtle humor. One story tells of the winter when a neighbor's improperly stored grain caved to dampness, forcing the village to improvise by hunting more aggressively and rationing even more carefully. Another recounts a night when wolves were driven away not by weapons, but by communal vigilance and coordinated noise-making. These accounts emphasize that survival is a combination of knowledge, diligence, and collective action. Each story, though repetitive in some ways, reinforces the underlying principle. Life persists through preparation and cooperation, not luck alone. Yet not all outcomes are predictable or entirely within human control. In some years, despite meticulous preparation, villages face losses. Livestock may succumb to illness, stored crops may spoil, or sudden blizzards may make travel impossible. You observe a subtle, stoic acceptance among the villagers. Life is not fair, and survival is never guaranteed. The Yule feast, in retrospect, becomes more than just celebration. It is a symbolic affirmation that the village, momentarily, has beaten back the darkness, even if only for a brief interval. It is both a triumph and a reminder of fragility. Beyond the physical necessities, the Yule season reinforces social cohesion. Gift-giving, shared meals, and storytelling strengthen bonds. In winter, when isolation can be deadly, the importance of community cannot be overstated. Villagers rely not only on their own skills but also on trust, that neighbors will share firewood, warn of danger, or assist in emergencies. In this light, Yule is as much about survival psychology as it is about calories and warmth. The rituals of feasting, music, and decoration carry subtle but crucial utility. They maintain morale, reinforce communal identity, and remind everyone that even in the deepest winter, they are not alone. By mid-January, the worst of the season often begins to pass, though the snow and cold may linger for months. You notice the gradual shift in routine, less extreme rationing, longer daylight hours allowing for slightly more outdoor work, and the beginning of preparation for the upcoming planting season. Survivors reflect on the long months behind them, noting successes and failures alike. What worked? What could be improved? These reflections feed directly into the strategies for next year, ensuring that knowledge accumulated over one harsh winter strengthens the community's resilience for the next. The Yule feast, therefore, is both a temporal anchor and a metaphorical compass. It marks the turning point of the winter, provides sustenance and joy, and serves as a repository of collective knowledge. Through meticulous preparation, careful rationing, and shared experience, the villagers endure, demonstrating human resilience against one of the most relentless forces they face, the northern winter. The seemingly boring details the rotation of barrels, the meticulous care of fires, the daily tending of livestock emerge as the foundation of survival, proving that endurance often lies in routine and repetition rather than heroic feats. And yet, as you watch the village slowly emerge from the grip of winter, a quiet thought remains. The survival of these communities depended on centuries of accumulated knowledge, careful observation of nature, and social cohesion. But how many of these lessons have been lost to time? Could a modern observer, armed with convenience and technology, truly comprehend the quiet, relentless skill required to endure a medieval winter? The resilience of these villagers, so ordinary in appearance, resonates across centuries as a reminder. Survival is rarely glamorous, but it shapes the course of human history in profound ways. Story 2, St. Lucia's Day, Light in the Long Dark. You awaken in a small Scandinavian village, the kind where the sun barely rises above the horizon in late December. It is a world of cold shadows and icy landscapes, where snow crunches underfoot, and the rivers are frozen solid. The air itself seems to resist warmth, making even the simplest tasks a trip to the well, feeding the livestock, chopping firewood feel like a battle against the elements. In these months, darkness dominates life in ways that are both physical and psychological. People have learned to measure their days not in hours of sunlight, but in the practical rhythms of survival. The burning of a fire, the storage of food, the tending of animals. And yet, in the bleakest part of the year, a ritual emerges that is both practical and symbolic. St. Lucia's Day, celebrated on the 13th of December. The festival of St. Lucia is a peculiar blend of Christian tradition and older pre-Christian beliefs. In this village, it is said that the saint's arrival brings light to the darkest time of year. You see young girls, dressed in long white gowns, bearing candles on their heads and in their hands, parading through the snow-dusted streets. The flame is more than decorative. It is a lifeline against the pervasive gloom. Candles are carefully rationed, precious and often homemade, crafted from tallow or beeswax. In a place where daylight is scarce, a single flame is a profound relief, both for warmth and for the comfort it brings to the mind. Inside the homes, preparations for St. Lucia's Day are intertwined with survival. The girls carry small pastries, often saffron buns called lussekatter, into the household, and these buns are more than festive treats. They are high-calorie food, dense and sustaining, baked specifically to provide energy during the long day. Families store flour, milk, and butter carefully for this purpose, knowing that such supplies are limited during winter. Every element of the celebration reflects a dual purpose: nourishment and symbolic triumph over darkness. You recognize a pattern familiar from Yule. Festivity is inseparable from practicality. The villagers themselves take measures to make the festival possible. Even in this small settlement, lights are scarce. Windows are small, designed to conserve heat, and snow often reflects what little daylight exists. Bringing candles into every room is a calculated act, offering enough illumination to reduce accidents and boost morale, but always carefully monitored to avoid fire hazards. You notice how ritual and caution are interwoven. The symbolic procession of light is a social and spiritual practice, but it also provides tangible benefits in an environment that is otherwise cold, dark, and potentially dangerous. Children participate eagerly in the celebrations, learning through imitation and instruction. They observe the careful handling of flames, the singing of songs, and the preparation of pastries, absorbing knowledge about cooperation and ritual. These practices are not mere superstition, they are deeply embedded in survival strategy. Maintaining morale, teaching careful attention to fire, and reinforcing social cohesion are all subtle lessons delivered under the guise of festivity. Every song, every candle, every shared bun carries layers of meaning far beyond what an outsider might notice. Meanwhile, outside the village, the harsh landscape presses relentlessly. Wolves and other predators roam the fringes of settlements, hungry in the absence of easy prey. Travel is treacherous, even for a few kilometers. Snowdrifts can swallow paths entirely, and rivers may freeze and crack unpredictably. You realize that St. Lucia's Day is in part a psychological countermeasure against these threats. The light, the food, and the social cohesion of the festival reinforce resilience. A community that observes these rituals is more alert, more cooperative, and better able to navigate the perils of midwinter. Historical records suggest that the festival evolved from older Norse traditions, in which a symbolic queen of light or a fire-bearing maiden was celebrated to mark the turning of the dark season. The Christianization of the festival merged these older beliefs with the story of St. Lucia, a young woman martyred for her faith, who brought light to the suffering. This synthesis reflects the adaptive nature of medieval culture. Rituals were maintained because they served a practical and psychological purpose, even as their spiritual narratives evolved. You notice that human communities have always intertwined belief, symbolism, and practical survival strategies, often in ways that are nearly invisible until closely examined. Preparation for the festival requires meticulous work. Candles are rolled or dipped days in advance. Dough is kneaded carefully and left to rise despite the cold, and homes are cleaned and organized, partly to honor the saint, but partly to ensure that fire hazards are minimized during the celebrations. You note how even seemingly trivial tasks, dusting, sweeping, arranging benches, interact with survival strategy, minimizing risk, ensuring efficient use of scarce heat sources, and preparing spaces where humans can gather safely for warmth and sustenance. In these details, the invisible scaffolding of survival is laid. As the day of St. Lucia approaches, anticipation builds. The air is thick with the scent of baking buns, melted tallow, and pine from small evergreens used for decoration. Villagers move with deliberate caution, knowing that the fragile balance of warmth, light, and food must be maintained. Children practice songs and processions. Elders check that candles will burn steadily, and the community reinforces the social fabric that will carry it through the remaining weeks of winter. The festival, in essence, is a rehearsal for endurance, a test of coordination, diligence, and collective spirit. Yet, despite meticulous preparation, questions remain. How much can ritual truly mitigate the physical hardships of winter? Can light, food, and community ritual protect against frostbite, malnutrition, or the sudden cruelty of nature? These uncertainties linger in the mind even as candles flicker against the long night, highlighting the fragile intersection of human ingenuity and the environment. The festival is at once triumphant and tentative, a bright declaration of resilience, shadowed by the ever-present risk of failure. And so, as St. Lucia's procession winds through the village, you are left with the quiet realization that even a seemingly simple festival carries profound implications. In this ritual of light and food, the villagers demonstrate both cultural continuity and practical survival strategy. Every candle lit, every pastry shared, every song sung reinforces endurance. But as you watch the flames flicker across snow-dusted faces, you cannot help but wonder, what will be required to carry this fragile resilience through the darkest weeks yet to come? The day after St. Lucia's procession begins with quiet, deliberate activity. Snow crunches underfoot as villagers venture outdoors to tend livestock, break ice in water troughs, and check that firewood supplies remain sufficient. The festival may bring joy and light, but winter itself is unyielding. Survival is a daily negotiation with the environment, and the rituals of St. Lucia's Day are as much about endurance as celebration. Each act, the careful lighting of candles, the preparation of saffron buns, the songs sung around the hearth intertwines practical necessity with symbolic meaning. Inside the village homes, the flames from the procession continue to play a central role. Candles are positioned strategically to provide light for tasks, illuminating kitchens where bread dough is kneaded or fish are cleaned and preserved. The light is essential, not simply for morale, but for preventing accidents. Chopping wood, handling knives, and tending fires in near darkness is dangerous work. Villagers have long understood this connection between ritual and survival, and their practices reflect a blend of experience, superstition, and practicality. Every flame represents not only hope but tangible safety. Children, participating eagerly in St. Lucia's Day, are learning much more than songs and processions. Observing the careful handling of fire and food teaches them essential survival skills. They learn patience while waiting for dough to rise despite the cold, attention to detail in trimming wicks and pouring tallow, and cooperation as they walk in processions without letting flames extinguish. Even their white gowns are functional. Loose clothing allows freedom of movement for chores, and linen or wool provides insulation in a drafty hall. These seemingly ceremonial details double as lessons in resilience, preparing the next generation for the hardships of northern winters. Food remains central to the survival strategy embedded in St. Lucia's rituals. The saffron buns, rich in butter and eggs, provide concentrated energy that is essential during the long, cold days when foraging and hunting are difficult. Families also ensure that high-calorie, storable foods, salted fish, dried meat, and root vegetables are readily accessible. By organizing meals around the festival, villagers not only celebrate but also reinforce resource management practices. The feast becomes a rehearsal in rationing, small, deliberate indulgences embedded within careful planning, ensuring that supplies last until the thaw comes months later. Outside, the harsh realities of the landscape remain constant. Wolves and foxes probe the edges of settlements, rivers are icy hazards, and sudden storms can immobilize the village for days. St. Lucia's Day, while primarily symbolic, serves as a reminder of communal interdependence. Processions, shared meals, and songs strengthen social bonds, ensuring that families and neighbors cooperate when danger arises. A child who learns to walk carefully with a candle may someday help guide a neighbor through blizzard conditions. A baker who times buns perfectly may prevent starvation in the weeks to come. These seemingly minor practices accumulate into a complex network of resilience. Historically, St. Lucia's Day evolved from older Scandinavian winter rites, likely connected to pre-Christian celebrations of light during the solstice. Some accounts describe a fire-bearing maiden or queen of light, leading villagers through darkness with torches or lanterns. With Christianization, St. Lucia, a young woman martyred in Sicily, was integrated into this framework, transforming an older ritual into a faith-based celebration. Yet the practical significance of light and food remained unchanged. The cultural adaptation illustrates a broader principle. Human rituals persist because they solve problems, not only because they inspire. They codify survival strategies into stories, songs, and processions that reinforce daily life. In addition to physical survival, the festival addresses psychological endurance. The midwinter darkness is oppressive, with days that last only a few hours and nights stretching endlessly. The simple act of gathering around candlelight, singing songs, and sharing food counteracts isolation and depression. Psychologists today would recognize the festival's effects on morale. Small, repeated communal rituals strengthen social cohesion, reduce stress, and maintain mental health. In a pre-industrial context, these psychological benefits were crucial. Villagers who could maintain calm, cooperative behavior during the long nights were far more likely to survive than those who succumbed to despair or conflict. As the day progresses, villagers also tend to preparation for the weeks ahead. Firewood stocks are checked again, ice in water containers is broken or melted, and provisions are assessed for spoilage or depletion. Observing the patterns of weather and daylight informs decisions: when to send children to collect firewood, when to repair fences, when to rotate meat from storage. St. Lucia's Day is not a pause from survival. It is a structured interlude that integrates festivity with ongoing vigilance. The festival's timing near the winter solstice maximizes its practical and symbolic impact. Light returns slowly, morale is reinforced at the darkest point, and communal resources are consolidated. By evening, as candles flicker and children sing once more, you notice a subtle tension underlying the celebrations. While rituals provide structure and comfort, the unpredictability of nature cannot be entirely mitigated. Storms can still isolate the village, illness can claim livestock, and shortages can arise despite careful planning. The festival teaches humility as well as endurance. Human effort is significant, but it is always measured against the environment. Even a successful St. Lucia's Day is both a victory and a reminder that survival is ongoing, incremental, and often precarious. And yet there is an undeniable sense of accomplishment. Villagers emerge from the day with strengthened bonds, energized by shared light and warmth, and reassured that communal and practical strategies are working. The ritual's careful, repetitive, and perhaps monotonous encode critical survival knowledge: how to manage resources, maintain fire and light, coordinate labor, and sustain morale. Every detail, from candle placement to bun preparation, has consequences. What seems at first glance ceremonial is, in fact, a form of social engineering for survival. As you observe the villagers settling down for another night, you are left with a lingering question. Even with such careful planning, communal effort, and centuries of accumulated wisdom, how much can ritual truly protect against the most extreme hardships of winter? Will the light of St. Lucia guide them safely through the darkest weeks, or are some trials beyond even the most diligent preparation? The long, pale days of December press on relentlessly. You watch as villagers adjust to the midwinter environment with a quiet, disciplined rhythm that has become second nature. Snow blankets the ground in thick, unbroken layers, and the frozen rivers glint under weak sunlight. Inside each home, the careful management of light, heat, and sustenance continues to dominate daily life. St. Lucia's Day has passed, yet the lessons of the festival persist. The procession of light is over. The saffron buns have been eaten, but the underlying strategies that ensured its success remain in effect: careful planning, communal cooperation, and the integration of ritual with survival. In the days that follow, the candles and torches of the festival are repurposed for practical needs. Smaller flames light kitchens for meal preparation, workshops for repairs, and barns where livestock are tended. The wisdom embedded in the festival, the meticulous attention to fire, food, and social coordination, manifests in ordinary daily tasks. Children, now seasoned participants, continue to rehearse careful movements, mindful handling of hot objects, and collaborative activity. The festival has reinforced both skills and social bonds, ensuring that knowledge and resilience are transmitted to the next generation. In a world of uncertainty, continuity is itself a powerful survival tool. food management continues to dominate life. The saffron buns and other festival treats, though consumed in celebration, are part of a broader rationing system. Villagers carefully monitor supplies, rotating salted meat, root vegetables, and dried fish to prevent spoilage. In some households, surplus baked goods are distributed to neighbors, reinforcing alliances and mutual aid networks. These exchanges, small as they may seem, are critical. Sharing resources during a period of scarcity is a tangible investment in communal security. The festival, therefore, is not only a cultural event, but also a practical reinforcement of cooperation, reminding everyone that survival depends on collective effort. Beyond the physical necessities, St. Lucia's Day has reinforced psychological endurance. The long, oppressive nights continue, but the memory of candlelight, music, and shared meals provides comfort and hope. Villagers demonstrate subtle but critical strategies for maintaining morale: communal storytelling, song, and the simple repetition of ritual behaviors. In an era without artificial light or modern entertainment, these structured activities are far more than leisure. They are mechanisms for sustaining mental health in extreme conditions. Observing this, you understand how human societies have always intertwined culture, ritual, and survival in ways that may appear trivial but are profoundly consequential. Historical records indicate that the festival's significance evolved over centuries. Originally a pagan observance of light during the solstice, it merged with Christian devotion to St. Lucia, creating a hybrid celebration that endured through social and religious transformations. Yet, the practical elements light, food, cooperation remained constant. This continuity illustrates a remarkable principle. Human customs often persist because they encode adaptive strategies for managing environmental challenges. In St. Lucia's Day, the spiritual and the practical coexist, a testament to the subtle efficiency of cultural evolution. What appears as ceremonial flourishes are actually refined tools for managing risk and uncertainty. As the darkest weeks of winter continue, the villagers demonstrate the cumulative impact of these strategies. Fires remain steady, food stores are sufficient, and community networks are robust. Individual resilience, nurtured through careful daily routines, combines with collective support to create an environment in which survival is achievable even in harsh conditions. It is not heroism but diligence, not daring but preparation, that sustains them. The festival of St. Lucia, though brief in duration, has played a critical role in reinforcing these principles at a pivotal moment in the seasonal cycle. And yet, the uncertainty of the environment remains. Storms may still isolate the village, illness may strike unexpectedly, or shortages may arise despite careful planning. You are left contemplating the delicate balance between human effort and natural forces. How much control can a community truly exert over winter's severity? St. Lucia's Day provides structure, motivation, and cohesion, but the environment is indifferent. Survival depends on a continual interplay of knowledge, resourcefulness, and communal cooperation, tested repeatedly over time. In reflection, the festival exemplifies the broader pattern of medieval survival, ordinary people managing extraordinary conditions with ingenuity and ritual. The light of St. Lucia, the careful preparation of food, and the structured cooperation of the community all serve as a testament to human resilience. These strategies, though seemingly mundane, carry profound consequences. They preserve life, transmit knowledge, and maintain hope during months when darkness dominates. As the village endures, you recognize a timeless lesson. Survival is not merely the avoidance of death, but the cultivation of continuity, community, and courage in the face of relentless challenge. And so, as candlelight fades into routine evening fires, you are left with a quiet contemplation. In every ritual, every carefully managed task, and every moment of shared warmth, humans have found ways to endure, adapt, and flourish even when the night seems endless. How many of these small, precise acts of resilience have shaped history in ways that no record fully captures? Story 3. The Festival of Fools, Winter Merriment or Hidden Warning. You find yourself in a bustling medieval town in France, sometime in the 15th century. The snow has begun to settle along narrow streets, but the cold is not enough to dampen the anticipation that hums through the market square. The Festival of Fools, a peculiar winter celebration, is underway, a festival officially sanctioned by the church, yet seemingly designed to invert normal life. At first glance, it appears frivolous, even chaotic. Priests wearing masks, minor officials crowned bishops for a day, and townsfolk engaging in mock ceremonies and absurd parodies. But beneath this veneer of merriment lies a complex interplay of social order, survival, and communal coping with the long, oppressive winter months. The festival typically occurs around the end of December or early January, a time when communities are at the peak of seasonal exhaustion. Winter is harsh, food is rationed, and the days are short and dim. Villagers, laborers, and clergy alike are subject to the stresses of scarcity, cold, and confinement. The Festival of Fools, with its inversion of hierarchy and sanctioned chaos, provides a psychological release. Imagine a town official, normally strict and unyielding, now forced to participate in a ridiculous ceremony, his robes askew and head crowned with paper and ribbons. Laughter erupts not only at the spectacle, but at the subtle subversion of rigid social structures. In a time when daily survival is arduous, this emotional outlet is itself a tool of endurance. Preparations for the festival are surprisingly meticulous. Though the celebrations appear spontaneous, considerable effort is invested in costumes, props, and logistical planning. Masks are carved from wood or molded from parchment. Robes are repurposed from worn garments. Drums, horns, and bells are ready to punctuate the mock ceremonies. You notice that every prop and costume has a dual purpose. Beyond entertainment, masks and layered garments provide warmth, and drums and horns double as signaling devices in emergency or work contexts. The line between festivity and utility is subtle, yet crucial. Even seemingly chaotic acts are rooted in a careful understanding of environmental and social conditions. The festival's rituals extend into the churches themselves, which are normally solemn spaces. During this time, clergy enact parodies of the Mass, and novices or lower-ranking clerics assume the roles of bishops and cardinals, often in exaggerated farcical fashion. From a survival perspective, these ceremonies serve multiple functions. First, they reinforce communal identity by reminding everyone of their shared culture, hierarchy, and religious tradition, even as it is temporarily subverted. Second, by encouraging laughter and collective engagement, they reduce stress and anxiety caused by winter deprivation. In essence, the Festival of Fools functions as a structured mechanism for psychological resilience. Food and drink play a central role in the festivities, much as they do in Yule or St. Lucia's Day. Bread, cheese, and wine are distributed, often in exaggerated or symbolic quantities, reinforcing social bonds and providing calories at a time when energy is limited. Villagers consume hearty, starchy foods to maintain warmth and strength, ensuring that the cold does not sap their vitality. Alcohol in moderation also serves as a practical tool. It increases body temperature temporarily and lubricates social interaction, easing tensions that may have built up during months of isolation and labor. Here, the interplay between celebration and survival is stark. Merriment is not frivolity, but a carefully embedded tool for sustaining life in winter. Children are also participants and observers. They witness adults behaving absurdly, learn songs and dances, and engage in minor mischief themselves. Through these activities, they internalize lessons about social hierarchy, cooperation, and acceptable forms of rebellion. In a sense, the festival is an educational exercise. It teaches flexibility, timing, and judgment. Children also gain confidence in navigating both structured and chaotic situations, skills that could later translate to practical problem-solving during the winter months, when unpredictability is a constant companion. The historical roots of the Festival of Fools are tangled, blending pre-Christian customs with ecclesiastical sanction. Some scholars suggest that it descends from Saturnalia-like celebrations, in which societal roles were inverted to relieve tension during the dead of winter. By permitting temporary chaos, the Church provided a safety valve, allowing communities to release the accumulated pressures of scarcity, labor, and cold. Ritualized disorder became a socially acceptable form of stress relief, demonstrating an early understanding of the link between mental well-being and survival. Despite the apparent joy, the festival carries subtle warnings. The mockery of authority, though temporary, reflects underlying social tensions. Scarcity, hunger, and exposure to winters hazard strain relationships, and such structured subversion prevents conflict from escalating into real violence. The absurdity is not meaningless. It is carefully choreographed to maintain equilibrium. You notice how laughter, music, and food together create a buffer against the stresses that might otherwise destabilize the community. As the day progresses, the festival spills into streets and homes, drawing villagers out of their cold, dark routines. The inversion of normal rules, students become masters, clerics become jesters, allows participants to experiment safely with power and behavior. This temporary reordering, you realize, is a survival strategy in miniature. It strengthens bonds, reinforces the understanding of rules, and allows the community to rehearse adaptability in a controlled environment. In harsh winters, flexibility and cooperation are as vital as food and fire. Yet even amidst revelry, the shadow of winter looms. Snow continues to pile high on roofs, rivers freeze, and the labor of subsistence persists. The Festival of Fools is brief, a day or two at most, but its effects ripple through the community. Laughter, shared meals, and playful subversion bolster morale and reinforce social cohesion, which in turn supports the long weeks of survival yet to come. It is a paradoxical combination. The structured chaos of the festival is one of the most reliable mechanisms for enduring the monotonous, grueling reality of medieval winter. And as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long, cold shadows across the streets, you are left pondering the dual nature of the festival. How merriment can conceal serious purpose, how chaos can stabilize a community, and how laughter can serve as a tool for endurance. The question lingers. In a world dominated by scarcity, cold, and darkness, how much of human ingenuity manifests in celebrations rather than in toil? Can ritualized absurdity be as vital to survival as careful preparation, rationing, or firewood? The day following the opening of the Festival of Fools is quieter, yet the underlying currents of survival and social strategy remain very much alive. Outside, the snow glistens under weak sunlight, but the cold remains sharp, and the work of survival continues unabated. Villagers tend to their animals, repair roofs laden with snow, and ration what remains of stored food. Amidst these mundane routines, the lessons of the festival ripple subtly through daily life. Laughter, parody, and temporary inversion of social norms have created a reservoir of psychological resilience that will carry the community through the harshest weeks of winter. Inside the longhouses and parish halls, villagers reflect on the previous day's chaos. What seemed at first to be nonsense, the crowning of jesters, mock sermons, and playful pranks, reveals itself as a calculated social strategy. The festival allows ordinary people to witness the fragility and flexibility of authority. By temporarily subverting hierarchies, the community reinforces its cohesion. Participants understand the rules implicitly, appreciate the normal order, and learn how to adapt when circumstances shift. In the context of winter scarcity, this adaptability is crucial. Life rarely follows plans, and the ability to respond creatively to unforeseen challenges, storms, food shortages, or illness can mean the difference between survival and disaster. Food continues to play a central role. Bread, cheese, salted meat, and wine, distributed during the festival, serve both nutritional and social purposes. They replenish calories expended in work or celebration and act as symbolic gestures of generosity and reciprocity. The festival, in essence, is a mechanism for redistributing resources safely, reducing potential conflict that might arise from scarcity. A peasant who received extra bread yesterday now feels invested in the cohesion of the community, reinforcing networks that will be critical in the weeks ahead. Survival, in this sense, is inseparable from social strategy. Shared abundance fosters loyalty, cooperation, and mutual support. Children, once observers, become participants and learners. They mimic the behaviors of adults in the parade and mock ceremonies, absorbing lessons about hierarchy, cooperation, and appropriate limits of behavior. Even in a seemingly frivolous game of role reversal, critical skills are taught: patience, attention to timing, negotiation, and group coordination. The festival's structured chaos is, in effect, a training ground for navigating uncertainty, preparing the next generation for both social and environmental challenges. By engaging in controlled disorder, children practice adaptability in miniature, reinforcing survival skills in a non-threatening context. Historically, the festival reflects centuries of cultural adaptation. Its origins may trace to Saturnalia and other pre-Christian winter rites, which celebrated the cyclical renewal of light and fortune through inversion and play. With Christianization, the Church formalized these practices, integrating them into the liturgical calendar while retaining their essential function: stress relief and reinforcement of communal bonds. The paradox of sanctioned chaos demonstrates a keen awareness of human psychology. Even in harsh, demanding environments, people need outlets for emotion, creative expression, and social interaction to maintain resilience. The Church's endorsement of such festivities indicates a sophisticated, if understated, understanding of the social mechanisms that underpin survival. Music, song, and noise continue to feature prominently. Bells, horns, and drums accompany processions and games, adding rhythm and energy to otherwise cold and laborious days. These auditory elements are not purely celebratory. They serve practical purposes as well. Sound signal shifts in activity, guide groups through snowy streets, and alert villagers to hazards, from approaching predators to dangerous ice. Even seemingly chaotic drumming is underpinned by logic and experience. The interplay of festivity and function is evident everywhere. Humor, noise, and movement strengthen both the spirit and the physical coordination of the community. Yet winter remains unforgiving. Despite careful planning, unexpected storms can isolate the town, snow can collapse roofs, and livestock may succumb to cold or disease. Here, the Festival of Fools plays a subtle but vital preventive role. By reinforcing social cohesion, teaching adaptability, and releasing tension, it reduces the likelihood of interpersonal conflict, panic, or disorganization during crises. A community that has rehearsed controlled chaos is better equipped to endure unplanned events. The festival, in essence, is not a diversion from survival. It is an embedded strategy for sustaining it. As villagers return to their routines, the lessons of the day echo quietly. Authority is respected but flexible. Resources are shared. Creativity, humor, and cooperation are recognized as essential tools. The psychological buffer created by the festival persists long after the crowns and masks are put away. Work that once seemed dreary, the chopping of wood, the tending of animals, the monitoring of food stores, is now reinforced by the knowledge that human ingenuity, collaboration, and morale can buffer even the harshest conditions. Survival is, as always, a combination of preparation, labor, and subtle social engineering. And yet questions linger. Even with these rituals, structured cooperation, and reinforced social bonds, nature remains indifferent. Could this combination of humor, hierarchy, and rationing truly counter the most severe winter months? how much of human endurance is built upon practical measures, and how much upon psychological resilience encoded in song, story, and festival. These unresolved tensions remind you that medieval life, particularly in the dead of winter, was a constant negotiation. Each meal, each act of cooperation, each laugh was both temporary relief and long-term investment in survival. The Festival of Fools draws to its close as winter deepens further. Streets, once alive with mock ceremonies, drums, and laughter, grow quieter. The snow continues to blanket roofs and lanes, the air sharp and unyielding, and villagers resume the steady routines of survival. Yet something subtle persists from the festival, a renewed sense of collective strength, a tacit understanding that structured chaos has a purpose, and the awareness that even in the harshest months, ingenuity, humor, and social cohesion are as vital as firewood or salted meat. In the days following the festival, the benefits of the celebration become increasingly apparent. Villagers work with renewed focus, fortified by shared joy and camaraderie. Tasks that might have seemed monotonous, chopping wood, tending livestock, repairing fences, now carry the implicit reinforcement of communal cooperation. People are calmer, more flexible, and better able to navigate uncertainty. You notice that laughter, previously dismissed as frivolous, has served as a mechanism for resilience. It strengthens bonds, reduces tension, and fosters problem-solving by encouraging adaptability and observation. In a harsh winter, psychological endurance can be as critical as physical preparedness. The festival also serves as a subtle tool for maintaining order. By allowing temporary subversion of hierarchy, priests, officials, and townspeople swapping roles in absurd ceremonies, latent social tensions are diffused. The townspeople leave the festival with reinforced respect for norms, having experienced the boundaries of acceptable behavior in a safe, structured context. This ensures that during the remaining long, dark weeks, cooperation remains high, disputes are minimized, and collective resources, food, labor, and attention are allocated efficiently. The inversion of order, far from being mere entertainment, is a survival strategy encoded in ritual. Food remains a central element of the winter strategy. Bread, cheese, and salted meat consumed during the festival bolster caloric intake, while shared feasting strengthens social cohesion. Small acts of generosity, offering a slice of bread, a cup of wine, or a portion of preserved meat, create networks of obligation and trust. You realize that these networks are crucial for survival. A neighbor willing to assist in feeding livestock, repairing a roof, or lending firewood in a crisis may literally save lives. The festival formalizes these exchanges, embedding them within celebration, so that what seems like merriment is also strategic social engineering. Children, having participated in the festival, now carry forward lessons in adaptability and observation. They have practiced stepping into new roles, coordinating actions, and paying attention to detail, skills which are essential for both daily survival and long-term communal cohesion. Observing them, you understand that the festival functions as both a social and educational institution. Through ritualized play, the next generation acquires the cognitive and social tools needed to endure harsh winters and unpredictable circumstances. Historically, the Festival of Fools reflects a remarkable understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. Originating from pre-Christian Saturnalia celebrations, it was incorporated into the church calendar to channel the energy and anxieties of communities during the winter months. The festival allowed controlled release of social pressure, maintained morale, and reinforced the subtle but essential frameworks of cooperation, resource distribution, and vigilance. Even the seeming chaos, mock bishops, jests, songs, and noise served layered purposes: education, morale building, and the preservation of social order. As the festival fades into memory, the villagers return fully to winter routines, but the effects linger. Coordination, flexibility, and emotional resilience are heightened. Practical survival tasks, firewood collection, food rationing, livestock care are approached with steadiness and clarity. The combination of ritual, humor, and structured social inversion has left the community stronger, more cohesive, and better prepared for the remaining weeks of darkness and cold. Laughter, which may appear trivial to outsiders, has become a tool for life itself. Yet even as the sun rises and sets behind the snow-laden rooftops, a quiet question remains. Can human ingenuity, celebration, and social cohesion truly withstand the full force of winter's unpredictability? The festival, in its controlled chaos, demonstrates that the community is resilient, but it also acknowledges that survival is never guaranteed. Harsh weather, illness, or food shortages may still test the limits of endurance. The Festival of Fools, with its masks and mockery, is both a temporary triumph over winter's gloom and a reminder of the fragile balance between preparation and chance. In reflection, the festival exemplifies a profound truth about medieval life. Survival is not solely a matter of food, fire, or shelter. It is also about the careful maintenance of morale, flexibility, and social networks. Humor, ritual, and structured chaos are as essential to enduring the long winter as any practical measure. Through laughter, mockery, and communal celebration, medieval communities found ways to reinforce resilience, educate the next generation, and navigate the relentless challenges of cold, scarcity, and darkness. As you leave the village square, dusted in snow and echoing with faint memories of song and laughter, you realize that the Festival of Fools was never truly frivolous. It was a carefully woven mechanism for enduring hardship, preserving community, and demonstrating that even in the coldest, darkest months, human ingenuity finds ways to persist. Story 4. The Hearth and the Home, Medieval Winter Cooking and Preservation. You enter a medieval household in Northern Europe, sometime in the 13th century. The sky is low and gray, and the snow outside has accumulated into soft, unbroken drifts. The wind rattles through the gaps in the wooden walls, and you immediately notice how central the hearth is to every aspect of daily life. In this era, the hearth is not just a source of warmth, it is the foundation of survival. From boiling water to baking bread, from preserving meat to melting snow for drinking water, the fire sustains life in ways that are subtle, continuous, and often invisible to outsiders. Understanding the rhythm of the hearth is crucial to understanding winter itself. The hearth dominates the household physically and socially. A family gathers around its heat to cook, eat, repair clothing, and sleep. Cooking is a slow, deliberate process. A stew may simmer for hours to extract nutrients from salted pork, dried legumes, and root vegetables. Bread requires careful attention to fermentation, kneading, and baking over open flames. Even something as mundane as boiling water for cleaning or washing demands fuel and vigilance. In a world without modern appliances, the careful management of fire is a form of daily strategy. A mismanaged hearth could mean burned meals, wasted wood, or a cold house, a literal threat to survival. Food preservation is intimately tied to the hearth. Smoking meat, drying fish, and preparing salted provisions are routine tasks that require both skill and constant observation. Families hang meat near the hearth to smoke it, simultaneously benefiting from heat and circulating smoke, which repels insects and prevents spoilage. Root vegetables are stored in pits insulated with straw, but occasional reheating or exposure to gentle warmth from the fire ensures they do not freeze solid. These practices seem mundane, but they are the product of centuries of accumulated knowledge. Each step, salting, smoking, drying, is a calculated measure against the harshness of winter, and failure can have dire consequences. The types of food consumed in winter reflect careful planning. Fresh produce is scarce, so families rely on preserved items, salted meats, dried fish, grains, and root vegetables. Stews, porridges, and pottages dominate meals, combining ingredients to maximize calories and nutrition. The hearth allows these foods to be transformed into edible, nourishing forms, extracting flavors and nutrients that raw ingredients alone cannot provide. Cooking is therefore not just cultural, it is functional, a direct response to environmental constraints. Every meal represents a negotiated balance between resource availability, caloric need, and practical survival. Fuel management is critical. Wood is collected during warmer months and carefully rationed throughout winter. Too much wood burned at once risks running out before spring. Too little may leave the household shivering and unable to cook essential meals. You notice the precision with which villagers split logs, stack them to dry, and monitor flame intensity. Even small miscalculations can affect not only warmth but also food safety, as insufficient heat may prevent thorough cooking or proper preservation. The hearth, therefore, is a locus of both domestic life and strategic thinking. Cooking is also a social activity. Families work together to prepare meals, with tasks divided by age and ability. Children fetch water or firewood, while adults manage the heat and attend to the cooking vessels. In larger households or communal halls, multiple families may share the same fire, pooling resources and labor. This collaboration ensures efficiency and reinforces social bonds, a practice that strengthens communal resilience against the hardships of winter. You begin to see how survival is both an individual and collective endeavor, rooted in the practicalities of daily routine. The hearth also provides psychological sustenance. The warmth, the light, the rhythmic sounds of crackling would create a small haven against the cold, dark world outside. In long, monotonous winter months, this domestic ritual preparing, cooking, and sharing food offers stability and continuity. The act of tending the fire, stirring a pot, or shaping dough becomes meditative, anchoring both body and mind. Survival, in this sense, depends not only on physical resources, but also on routines that sustain morale and focus. Historical records and archaeological evidence reveal the sophistication of these practices. Hearths were often centrally located, with smoke outlets carefully designed to minimize heat loss. Cooking vessels were durable, often cast iron or clay, able to withstand long, slow cooking. Storage containers, barrels, and pits were designed to prolong shelf life and maintain food safety. The integration of these technologies with daily routine shows that medieval households approached winter with methodical, almost scientific attention to detail. What may appear boring, the rotation of food stores, the management of fire, the regular stirring of stews is, in fact, essential knowledge encoded in habit and tradition. Yet, even with careful planning, uncertainty remains. Fires can falter, stored foods may spoil unexpectedly, and extreme cold can render roots in pits unusable. Every meal carries the potential for success or failure. You are left with the quiet realization that medieval survival relied on relentless diligence, a constant negotiation with materials, fire, and environmental conditions. The hearth, unassuming and central, is both the stage and the instrument of this delicate balance. As you watch a mother carefully stir a pot of barley and salted meat, children warming their hands near the fire, and smoke curling toward the low ceiling, you are reminded of an essential truth. In winter, survival is built on repetition, attention, and habit. The mundane rituals of cooking, tending, and preserving are as critical to life as any heroic act, and the rhythm of the hearth dictates the rhythm of human endurance. Yet one question remains lingering in your mind. Even with all this knowledge, all this careful planning, can a family truly survive the longest, coldest months if nature decides to test them beyond what experience has taught? The days grow shorter, and the cold becomes relentless. Outside, snow drifts pile against walls, rivers freeze into jagged sheets, and frost covers even the smallest cracks in doors and windows. Inside the household, however, the hearth remains a beacon of stability. Here, the work of winter continues not only in cooking daily meals, but in a complex system of preservation that ensures survival for weeks, sometimes months, ahead. Every action at the hearth is purposeful, measured, and designed to extract the maximum utility from limited resources. Smoking meat is one of the most critical tasks. Large cuts of pork or beef, often salted in advance, are hung near the hearth, exposed to gentle smoke over days or even weeks. The smoke dries the surface, preventing bacterial growth, while the slow heat helps prevent spoilage. You notice the careful attention paid to airflow, temperature, and distance from the flames. Too close, and the meat cooks rather than dries. Too far, and the smoke loses its preservative effect. This delicate balance reflects centuries of accumulated knowledge. Villagers rely on observation, experience, and precise timing to ensure that food remains edible through the harshest part of winter. Root vegetables are another cornerstone of winter survival. Turnips, parsnips, carrots, and cabbage are stored in pits or cellars, insulated with straw to prevent freezing. Yet this is not enough. Villagers periodically check the roots, removing any signs of rot, redistributing straw, and sometimes bringing a portion near the hearth to gently warm them, preventing ice crystals from destroying texture and taste. These seemingly boring tasks are, in reality, acts of life preservation. A mismanaged pit can lead to significant caloric loss, reducing the household's resilience and increasing vulnerability to illness and frostbite. Grains and legumes, often the most reliable source of nutrition, require meticulous storage. Barley, oats, and beans are kept in wooden barrels or ceramic containers, sealed against moisture and pests. Every barrel is inspected regularly. Any sign of mold or infestation triggers immediate action. Families rotate stocks, using older supplies first and replenishing with newly harvested grain, ensuring that nothing spoils prematurely. Cooking grains over the hearth takes hours, requiring constant attention. The slow simmer of porridge or stew extracts both flavor and nutrition, making otherwise dense, hard ingredients digestible and sustaining. These processes, though repetitive, are essential components of survival. Cooking vessels themselves are critical tools, carefully maintained to endure repeated use. Iron pots, cauldrons, and skillets are seasoned and monitored for cracks. Clay vessels are fired and repaired as needed. Each vessel represents not only functionality, but also the household's accumulated investment in labor and material. Without reliable cookware, even the best preserved food could become inedible, highlighting how survival depended on the integration of skill, technology, and daily diligence. Meal preparation is a communal activity, reinforcing both efficiency and social bonds. Children assist by fetching water, stirring pots, or chopping small vegetables, while adults manage the more complex aspects of cooking and preservation. These shared tasks teach responsibility, observation, and coordination skills necessary not only for food preparation, but for broader survival in the unpredictable winter landscape. Every chore, no matter how mundane, reinforces patterns of discipline and cooperation that are essential when conditions turn extreme. The hearth also doubles as a workspace for preserving other essentials. Tallow candles are made from animal fat, providing both light and a modest heat source for cold nights. Herbs, if available, are dried for seasoning or medicinal purposes. Fish are split, salted, and hung to dry, and even the ash from the hearth finds use in fields or as a cleaning agent. This integration of multiple survival functions into a single domestic space demonstrates efficiency born of necessity. The home itself becomes a multi-purpose survival tool, with the hearth at its center. Historical records indicate that these practices were widespread across medieval Europe, yet local variation was immense. Northern climates emphasized preservation of meat and root vegetables, while milder regions relied more on grains and wine. Archaeological evidence from charred grains in storage pits to smoke-blackened beams attests to the careful attention families paid to sustaining life through winter. The hearth was not merely a site of warmth. It was a laboratory of survival, where observation, skill, and repetition combined to stave off hunger, cold, and disease. Even with meticulous planning, uncertainty remained. A sudden thaw could flood storage pits, an outbreak of lice or rodents could spoil supplies, or an unexpected storm could delay access to essential resources. Families had to remain vigilant, adjusting strategies in response to changing conditions. The hearth, central to all of these efforts, became the locus of both control and contingency. Its fires provided warmth, preserved food, and maintained morale, but only because human effort, attention, and knowledge were applied consistently. And yet, despite the endless repetition and careful planning, a quiet tension persists. No amount of skill or diligence could completely control nature. Every preserved meal, every barrel of grain, every piece of smoked meat was a gamble against frost, decay, and misfortune. Survival required not only mastery of technique, but constant awareness of risk. As you watch a family gather around the hearth, stirring stews, checking storage, and tending to fire, you recognize that the rhythm of winter life is a cycle of preparation, vigilance, and subtle adaptation. The hearth is the stage upon which human endurance is both tested and maintained. The question lingers as evening settles. Even with centuries of accumulated knowledge, practiced skill, and careful planning, can a medieval household truly master the winter? Or is survival always a delicate balance between human diligence and the unpredictable forces of nature? Weeks pass, and the cold remains unrelenting. Snow blankets the countryside, the rivers are locked in ice, and daylight is brief and pale. Inside the household, however, the hearth continues to dominate daily life, its steady glow a constant reminder of human ingenuity in the face of adversity. Each meal, each preserved food item, each carefully managed fire represents not just sustenance but a delicate negotiation with the environment. By now, the rhythms of winter cooking and preservation have become ingrained. The family moves with practiced coordination, each member aware of their role in sustaining life through the long season. The most striking feature of these routines is their integration. Cooking, preservation, heating, and even domestic chores are inseparable. Each action has multiple functions. A pot of stew provides warmth, nutrition, and the satisfaction of a shared meal. Hanging salted meat near the fire preserves it while slowly adding flavor. Ash from the hearth is repurposed for field work or cleaning. Candle making not only illuminates the home, but allows controlled fire for cooking or warmth. In every step, ordinary labor is transformed into strategic survival practice. You realize that the mundane details, stirring a pot, rotating barrels, chopping wood, form the scaffolding of endurance, far more crucial than dramatic acts of heroism. Food, of course, remains central. Root vegetables, grains, dried fish, and salted meats dominate the diet, supplemented occasionally with preserved fruit, nuts, or honey. Every calorie is accounted for, every morsel carefully rationed. Stews and porridges are designed to be filling, nutrient-rich, and long-lasting, often cooked in quantities to last multiple days. Families maintain inventories of food, constantly monitoring spoilage, and adjusting consumption patterns to ensure that supplies last until spring. The practice is painstaking but vital. One miscalculation could jeopardize months of careful preparation. Survival is built on these quiet, repetitive acts of attention. The hearth also continues to provide psychological sustenance. Its warmth and light are constant comforts against the relentless cold and darkness outside. The smell of cooking, the crackling of flames, and the glow on snow-dusted walls create a sense of stability. Repetition, the daily tending of the fire, preparation of meals, and careful attention to storage anchors both body and mind. In a time when weeks of monotony can erode morale, these rituals are as important as food itself. Survival, you realize, is as much about maintaining focus, routine, and hope as it is about caloric intake or warmth. Children, too, have become adept at the demands of winter life. They assist in cooking, carrying firewood, and monitoring food supplies. In this way, practical survival skills are transmitted naturally across generations. The hearth becomes both classroom and laboratory. Children learn observation, patience, and coordination in the course of daily chores. By participating in these tasks, they internalize knowledge essential for life in harsh climates, ensuring that the household is prepared not just for the present, but for the winters to come. Repetition and attention to detail are the threads that connect one generation to the next. Historically, these practices reflect both ingenuity and adaptation. Archaeological finds from smoke-blackened beams to storage pits and iron cooking vessels demonstrate that medieval households developed sophisticated techniques to manage winter scarcity. The integration of fire, food preservation, and domestic organization shows a nuanced understanding of resources and environmental constraints. What may appear boring, stirring stews, rotating barrels, or monitoring firewood was, in reality, the backbone of survival. Every measured action preserved life and ensured continuity, reinforcing the idea that human endurance often relies on diligence rather than dramatic heroism. Even with careful preparation, winter remained unpredictable. Fires could falter, supplies could spoil, and sudden storms could isolate households. Families adapted by rotating duties, sharing resources with neighbors and learning to anticipate environmental changes. Survival was never guaranteed, yet the careful orchestration of routine, skill, and observation created a margin of safety. The hearth was not simply a fire. It was the center of knowledge, labor, and resilience. By late winter, the cumulative effect of these routines is apparent. Families remain nourished, warm, and prepared for the gradual return of sunlight. They reflect quietly on the months past, what worked, what failed, and how knowledge gained during one winter will inform the next. In these reflections, you see the broader significance of what may seem like mundane labor. The repetition of cooking, tending fires, and preserving food was not trivial. It was a deliberate, disciplined system of survival. Life was sustained not by luck or heroics, but by attention to detail, careful planning, and communal knowledge passed across generations. As you observe the household one evening, with children stirring porridge, adults checking barrels of preserved meat, and the hearth glowing steadily, a quiet thought lingers. The seemingly dull routines of daily winter life were among the most profound acts of human ingenuity. Every stir of the pot, rotation of food, and careful placement of wood contributed to survival. Medieval families endured months of darkness and cold not through dramatic events, but through meticulous, repetitive labor that shaped resilience, preserved life, and ensured continuity. And yet, you are left with one lingering question. Even with all this knowledge and diligence, how many households ultimately succumbed to the unforgiving winter? And how much of this accumulated wisdom has survived, quietly embedded in modern culinary and domestic practices without us fully realizing it? Story 5. Snowbound Soldiers, Winter Campaigns and Survival in Medieval Warfare. You find yourself on a frostbitten plain somewhere in northern Europe during the early 14th century. Snow drifts curl around your feet as you watch a company of medieval soldiers trudge forward, their breath visible in the frigid air. Armor, chainmail, and heavy woolen clothing offer some protection, but the cold gnaws relentlessly. Horses struggle through icy ground, dragging carts laden with provisions, while soldiers carry pikes, bows, and shields, their hands numb despite gloves and wrapped cloth. Winter campaigns were not only battles against enemy forces, but also against the environment itself. In this season, survival often depended more on skill, preparation, and resilience than on martial prowess. Provisioning an army for winter was a logistical nightmare. Food spoiled quickly in freezing weather, yet rations had to be sufficient to sustain both men and animals. Soldiers relied on salted meat, hard biscuits, dried legumes, and whatever root vegetables could be transported or foraged. Large camps built near forests or rivers were selected with careful attention to available resources, but even then, shortages were common. When supplies ran low, soldiers were forced to scavenge or raid local villages, creating tension with civilians and risking starvation if foraging proved insufficient. You notice how every march, every encampment, was planned not just for strategic advantage, but for access to sustenance, a reminder that medieval warfare was inseparable from survival. Shelter was equally crucial. Soldiers constructed temporary wooden huts, dug snow shelters, or utilized existing structures when possible. Fires were maintained carefully. Too large a blaze could reveal positions to the enemy, while too small left troops vulnerable to frostbite. Inside encampments, heat was rationed and prioritized for officers, the sick, and horses. Everyone else relied on layered clothing, furs, and huddling together for warmth. Exposure could be deadly. Hypothermia, frostbite, and illness claimed far more lives than combat during winter campaigns. The practical knowledge required to endure was as critical as skill with weapons, yet it was often underappreciated in contemporary chronicles. Water, often overlooked, was another essential concern. Rivers and wells frequently froze over, and melting snow required fuel and time. Drinking from partially frozen streams was risky, as thin ice could break, leading to dangerous immersion and illness. Soldiers also had to prevent their water supplies from freezing entirely. Small but repeated tasks, chipping ice, monitoring containers, and rotating water, were vital for hydration and preventing disease. The mundane labor of maintaining water supplies was as decisive for survival as a successful engagement on the battlefield. Medical care, primitive by modern standards, was another limiting factor. Frostbite, respiratory illness, and infections were rampant. Field surgeons used rudimentary techniques: bandaging, cauterization, and amputation. Herbs and poultices were employed when available, often supplemented by spiritual rituals or prayers. Even minor injuries could prove fatal in winter conditions, as exposure and limited mobility worsened outcomes. Soldiers learned to treat themselves, improvise splints, and keep wounds clean in the snow, knowledge that was passed along through observation, oral instruction, and practical necessity. The psychological strain was immense. Days were short, nights were bitterly cold, and isolation was common. Soldiers relied on camaraderie, shared routines, and occasional music or storytelling to maintain morale. Songs, chants, and practical jokes provided brief relief from monotony, while meals, however sparse, offered both nutrition and comfort. Leaders who recognized the importance of morale, distributing warmth, rations, and maintaining order, often succeeded where others failed. You see that endurance in winter warfare required more than courage. It demanded management of resources, social cohesion, and adaptability in the face of relentless environmental challenges. Historical accounts of winter campaigns illustrate the stakes vividly. The 1315–1317 Great Famine in Europe, for instance, coincided with numerous military operations, exacerbating the challenges of feeding troops and civilians alike. Armies often suffered catastrophic losses to starvation and disease before engaging in any combat. Similarly, the Swedish and Danish campaigns during the Kalmar Union frequently stalled in snowbound conditions, with soldiers succumbing to cold and exhaustion. Medieval chroniclers frequently noted these hardships, though they were often described in passing, overshadowed by tales of heroism. Yet for the soldiers themselves, enduring winter was the central challenge. Animals were critical companions, but also liabilities. Horses, oxen, and pack animals required feed, warmth, and protection from ice and snow. Starving animals slowed movement, while injured or frozen animals could jeopardize the army's mobility entirely. Careful management of livestock, rotation of feeding, and improvised bedding were daily responsibilities, requiring attention equal to that given to human soldiers. The lives of men and animals were intimately linked. One could not survive without the other in winter's grip. As you watch the soldiers huddle in snow-blocked tents, sharing meager rations and whispering plans for the next day's march, you begin to understand a sobering truth. Victory was never guaranteed in winter. Battles could be won or lost, but armies often died in their encampments, felled by cold, hunger, or disease. Survival demanded discipline, foresight, and a relentless attention to the small details, tasks that may seem mundane but were, in fact, the core of winter warfare. And yet, even as you observe these frozen encampments, a question lingers in your mind. How many of these soldiers, trained for battle and martial glory, were ultimately defeated not by swords or arrows, but by the relentless, indifferent force of winter itself? The morning after a snow-laden night begins slowly, with soldiers emerging from frost-coated tents, hoisting heavy boots, and rubbing numb hands and faces. The cold is more than an inconvenience, it dictates every action. Armies in winter were not only fighting enemies, they were contending with terrain, weather, and time itself. Even the most disciplined forces could falter if provisions ran low or the frost penetrated their defenses. Logistics, more than valor, often determined the fate of campaigns, and winter exposed weaknesses in planning with unforgiving clarity. Food management is the central concern. Rations are strictly controlled: salted meat, dried fish, hard bread, and sometimes grains or legumes. Each soldier receives measured portions, calculated to maximize energy while minimizing depletion of scarce supplies. If a caravan is delayed or horses falter in deep snow, rationing becomes even tighter, forcing choices between hunger and energy expenditure. The cold increases caloric demands, and what might be adequate in milder conditions is insufficient in freezing weather. You notice how soldiers guard their meager portions, sharing sparingly and conserving the most valuable energy sources for critical tasks. Fuel is equally vital. Fires are maintained continuously in camps, not for comfort alone, but to prevent frostbite and preserve essential supplies. Logs must be split and stacked with foresight, as firewood is a finite resource, especially on long marches away from forests or villages. Smoke must be controlled to avoid revealing positions to scouts or enemies, yet large enough to provide heat. Maintaining this balance is a constant challenge, requiring cooperation and vigilance. A poorly tended fire can have fatal consequences, whether by leaving soldiers exposed to cold or failing to cook essential food. Shelter in winter campaigns takes on strategic significance. Snow-blocked trenches, wooden huts, and repurposed barns are all employed to reduce exposure. Sleeping arrangements are carefully planned. Officers near heat sources, horses and pack animals in protected enclosures. Common soldiers arrange to maximize warmth while preserving fuel. Improvisation is constant. In extreme cold, even small errors such as a gap in a wall or a wet blanket can trigger frostbite, illness, or death. These mundane decisions, repeated day after day, have life-or-death consequences, making endurance a constant, skill-driven challenge. Water is a scarce resource and an unrelenting concern. Rivers freeze, wells are blocked, and melting snow consumes fuel. Soldiers carry small containers, but these often freeze overnight. Drinking partially melted snow is risky. Consuming it too quickly can chill the body, while insufficient intake leads to dehydration, compounding fatigue and vulnerability to cold. Daily routines revolve around maintaining hydration, melting, filtering, and rationing water, which may seem trivial compared to battles, yet is central to sustaining life in winter conditions. Disease and injury amplify the peril of winter campaigns. Frostbite, pneumonia, and gastrointestinal illnesses strike with terrifying efficiency. Minor wounds fester in freezing conditions, and limited medical care means that even a small infection can incapacitate a soldier. The combination of exhaustion, poor nutrition, and cold creates a feedback loop, weakening the body's natural defenses. Field surgeons, often poorly trained and operating in harsh conditions, struggle to manage injuries with rudimentary tools, herbs, and prayers. Survival depends not only on skill in battle, but on observation, improvisation, and relentless attention to detail. Animals remain critical allies, yet also liabilities. Horses and oxen are essential for movement and supply transport, yet they require feed, warmth, and rest. Starved or frozen animals slow the army, threaten mobility, and can jeopardize campaigns entirely. Soldiers develop intricate routines, rotating animal labor, monitoring health, and improvising bedding or shelter. The human and animal survival strategies are deeply intertwined. Neither can endure without the other in winter's grasp. The psychological burden of winter campaigns cannot be overstated. Days are short, monotonous, and bitterly cold. Soldiers face isolation, fatigue, and constant vigilance. Leaders who maintain morale through discipline, fair distribution of resources, or small comforts like music, stories, or shared meals often see their forces survive and perform better than those whose ranks are demoralized. Even laughter around a fire, brief as it may be, becomes a critical buffer against despair, demonstrating the interplay of social cohesion and survival. Historical examples underline the stakes. The Swedish campaigns during the Kalmar Union or the Northern French operations during the Hundred Years' War frequently saw troops decimated by winter before meeting the enemy in battle. Chroniclers record armies immobilized by snow, horses lost to starvation, and soldiers succumbing to frostbite in droves. Victory was elusive when nature itself was an adversary. These events remind us that warfare in winter was not merely a matter of tactics, but of endurance, preparation, and environmental mastery. As you observe the snowbound encampment, soldiers huddled near fires, officers planning supply routes, and animals struggling in the cold, you understand that survival in winter campaigns was a constant, detailed negotiation. Each day required attention to food, fire, shelter, water, and morale. Each small decision could mean life or death, often more so than combat itself. The harsh winter was not simply a backdrop, but an active participant in shaping medieval military history. And yet, a pressing question remains. Even with discipline, foresight, and careful management, how often did armies truly succeed against winter itself? How many fell not to swords, but to frost, starvation, or exhaustion? The interplay between human ingenuity and environmental adversity is stark, highlighting that survival in medieval warfare was as much about enduring nature as defeating an opponent. As winter deepens, the snow-covered landscape becomes both a battlefield and a prison. Soldiers continue to march, dig, cook, and guard, but the fight against the elements is relentless. By now, the difference between life and death hinges less on skill with weapons and more on the minutiae of survival. The careful maintenance of fires, rationing of provisions, tending of animals, and management of the human body against frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion. In the cold, mundane tasks, chopping wood, melting snow for water, rotating supplies carry the weight of strategy. The winter itself is an enemy, indifferent and unforgiving. Encampments evolve into intricate systems of endurance. Tents are reinforced with snow walls, fires are carefully stoked and monitored, and guards rotate to ensure both security and warmth. Officers oversee distribution of rations, assign specific survival tasks, and ensure that each soldier is equipped to face the cold. Even the most minor responsibilities, stoking a fire, checking water containers, or inspecting horses, become decisive. You notice that discipline, organization, and routine are as vital as courage or tactics, highlighting the subtle genius embedded in successful winter operations. The management of animals remains a central concern. Horses are fed first, with straw bedding provided to preserve warmth. Starving or frozen animals could halt movement entirely, and soldiers expend effort daily to tend to them. Pack animals carrying food, weapons, or medical supplies are rotated, fed, and sheltered to preserve their health. The success of the campaign depends equally on the endurance of men and beasts, a reminder that medieval warfare was deeply interdependent. An army could not survive winter without maintaining these fragile networks of life. Medical care, though primitive, becomes a lifeline. Frostbite is treated by gradual warming, circulation is monitored, and wounds are cleaned with limited resources. Soldiers often improvise solutions, wrapping frozen hands with heated cloth, using snow as a makeshift antiseptic, or employing herbal poultices. Survival depends not on modern medicine but on observation, improvisation, and shared knowledge. Even minor injuries neglected in warm seasons could become deadly under winter's unforgiving conditions. Morale is another crucial factor. Winter saps both body and spirit. Officers who maintain routines, provide small comforts, or allow brief humor and storytelling create resilience in their troops. Songs, shared meals, or practical jokes around a fire are not frivolous. They are life-saving tools, helping soldiers endure monotony, cold, and uncertainty. Laughter, camaraderie, and structure together form a buffer against despair, allowing men to continue when fatigue and frost threaten to overwhelm them. Historical records illustrate the deadly efficiency of winter itself. Campaigns often stalled or failed due to starvation, exposure, or disease, rather than combat. During the Swedish-Danish conflicts of the late 14th century, entire units succumbed to frostbite and hunger before meeting enemy forces. Chroniclers frequently noted that winter campaigns required as much planning, endurance, and ingenuity as battle tactics. Yet these crucial struggles were often overshadowed in histories focused on victories or defeats. The mundane labor of survival, fire tending, rationing, and foraging was as decisive as the clash of swords. By late winter, the cumulative effects of careful planning, discipline, and endurance are evident. Soldiers who have survived are stronger, more experienced, and more cohesive. They have learned to navigate scarcity, endure cold, and maintain functionality under relentless stress. Victory may be elusive, but survival itself is a triumph, demonstrating the subtle but profound importance of endurance in history. The difference between success and failure often lies in the ordinary, unglamorous acts of preparation and maintenance, rather than in dramatic heroics on the battlefield. You observe the final days of the campaign before spring begins to soften the snow. Soldiers eat the last of their rations, pack the remaining supplies, and ready their horses for renewed movement. Their bodies are tired, but their skills built through meticulous attention to food, fire, water, and shelter have been honed to an extraordinary degree. The campaign serves as a testament to human resilience. Even when faced with indifferent nature and limited resources, disciplined action, cooperation, and attention to detail allow survival against daunting odds. And yet, as you reflect on the experience, a quiet question remains. How many armies in history never returned from winter campaigns, claimed not by enemy forces but by cold, hunger, and fatigue? How much of what we remember as medieval military history is shaped not by battles won or lost, but by the countless men and animals who endured or failed to endure the quiet, relentless challenge of winter itself? Survival, it seems, was often the ultimate victory. Story 6. Icicles and Inquisition. Winter in monastic life. You step into a stone monastery in northern England, sometime in the 12th century. The landscape is covered in snow, the river frozen, and the world outside silent except for the occasional groan of timber under ice. Inside, the monks move with deliberate slowness, wrapped in woolen robes, their breath visible in the cold corridors. Winter in a monastery is a time of both austerity and survival. Every stone wall, every fire in the kitchen, every preserved ration represents months of preparation, careful labor, and ritualized endurance. Life here seems monotonous, almost painfully slow, but that monotony conceals a delicate orchestration of survival strategies honed over centuries. The monastery's routines are structured around prayer, labor, and sustenance. The divine office dictates daily activity, yet winter forces practical adaptation. Frost bites the edges of windows and doors. Candles and oil lamps burn constantly to provide light and heat, but fuel is limited. Monks take turns tending fires in refectories, dormitories, and kitchens, ensuring warmth reaches where it is most needed. Even small failures, neglecting the hearth, letting water freeze, or mismanaging wood stores could compromise comfort, health, and productivity. In these austere conditions, survival and spirituality are intertwined. The physical act of maintaining warmth and nourishment supports the mental focus required for prayer and study. Food in winter is both rationed and ritualized. Monks rely heavily on preserved staples, salted meat, dried legumes, cheese, and root vegetables stored in cellars or pits insulated against freezing. Bread is baked carefully, often in communal ovens, to sustain the community for days. Stews and porridges are prepared in large cauldrons over open fires, with attention paid to both nutrition and flavor extraction. These seemingly mundane acts, chopping vegetables, tending pots, rotating barrels of stored food, are vital for survival. They demonstrate a quiet ingenuity. The monks convert scarcity into sustainability through discipline, observation, and repetition. Water is another essential concern. Frozen wells or snow-blocked channels require careful management. Monks chip ice, melt snow, and carry water throughout the cloisters, often in heavy stone or wooden vessels. This labor, repetitive and physically demanding, ensures hygiene, cooking, and sustenance. It also underscores the interplay between mundane domestic chores and survival. The simple act of maintaining clean water is a critical shield against winter illness, reinforcing how survival in a monastery depended on attention to tiny, repetitive tasks. Monastic winter life also emphasizes warmth for the most vulnerable. The infirmary and novices' quarters receive special attention. Fires are tended with priority, and rations are distributed to sustain the sick and inexperienced. Monks develop routines to maximize heat and nutrition, layering blankets, insulating doors, and rotating firewood. These practices are not random, but the product of careful observation and experience, encoded into daily ritual. Winter is a teacher of vigilance, patience, and foresight. Even the most spiritual activities are grounded in practical necessity. The monastery's architecture reflects winter survival strategies. Thick stone walls retain heat, small windows limit drafts, and central hearths in refectories radiate warmth. Smoke exits are carefully designed to minimize heat loss while maintaining ventilation. Dormitories are organized to conserve body heat, with communal sleeping arrangements maximizing warmth. These details, seemingly trivial, demonstrate an intimate understanding of winter's dangers. Survival is built not on heroics but on observation, experience, and integration of routine into daily life. Historical accounts reveal how winter shaped monastic schedules and priorities. Chroniclers note extended periods of reading, copying manuscripts, and prayer during the cold months, suggesting that physical constraints of winter reinforced intellectual and spiritual pursuits. Yet behind the silence and study lies a constant negotiation with the environment. Food, warmth, water, and health dictate the rhythm of activity. Monastic life, austere as it appears, is underpinned by practical survival measures that ensure continuity through the harshest season. Even in their spiritual focus, monks rely on observation and experimentation. Root vegetables stored in pits must be rotated to prevent freezing. Bread must be baked to last for several days. Firewood allocation is calculated daily. Each monk, whether novice or elder, participates in maintaining these systems. The rhythm of survival, repetitive, disciplined, and precise, is inseparable from the rhythm of monastic life. This quiet labor, repeated endlessly through winter, sustains not only the body but also the intellectual and spiritual continuity of the community. And yet, even with these routines and strategies, uncertainty remains. Severe storms, ice, or illness can threaten stability. Despite centuries of accumulated knowledge, monks are still subject to the whims of nature. Survival in winter is never guaranteed, even within the fortified walls of a monastery. You are left with a lingering question. How much of the spiritual discipline observed in these communities is shaped not only by faith, but by the mundane, repetitive acts that ensure life itself in the face of winter's relentless grip. The monastery is now fully immersed in the heart of winter. Outside, snow drifts cover the cloisters, the river is encased in ice, and the cold seems to seep through even the thick stone walls. Inside, the monks' days are structured with relentless precision, balancing prayer, study, and the practical demands of survival. The cold, silent, and unforgiving dictates every activity. Yet within this austere rhythm, a remarkable system of adaptation has emerged, one that allows the community not only to endure winter, but to maintain continuity of spiritual and intellectual life. Food remains a central concern. Daily rations are calculated carefully, balancing calories and longevity. Stews of legumes, root vegetables, and salted fish or meat are simmered over the hearth, filling the refectory with warmth and fragrance. Each ingredient is chosen for durability, nutritional value, and storage life. Bread, baked in communal ovens, is portioned to last for several days, with strict attention paid to avoiding spoilage. Even minor lapses, letting a pot boil dry or failing to rotate stored vegetables, could imperil the household's endurance. The mundane, repetitive labor of food management becomes a sophisticated survival strategy. Water, essential for cooking, cleaning, and drinking, requires constant attention. Wells may freeze, snow must be melted, and ice must be chipped carefully. Monks carry heavy vessels through the cold corridors, ensuring that water remains available for both practical and ritual purposes. Hygiene is monitored despite the chill, with water used sparingly to conserve warmth while preventing the spread of disease. The physical effort involved in securing water under winter conditions underscores how survival depended on sustained diligence, endurance, and foresight. Fires are the lifeblood of the monastery. Monks rotate duties to maintain hearths in refectories, dormitories, infirmaries, and kitchens. They carefully regulate flame intensity, balancing warmth with fuel conservation. Too little heat risks frostbite and illness. Too much wastes precious wood. Smoke is managed to avoid loss of heat, while providing ventilation for cooking and living spaces. The maintenance of fire is therefore both practical and strategic, a constant negotiation with the environment that requires observation, experience, and teamwork. The monastery's architecture and daily routines are designed to maximize winter survival. Thick stone walls retain heat, small windows limit drafts, and central hearths provide radiant warmth. Dormitories are arranged to allow shared body heat, while communal spaces like the refectory ensure that multiple monks benefit from a single source of fire. The cloistered walkways, although exposed to the elements, are maintained and cleared to facilitate essential movement. Even in silence, the physical layout and human labor combine to create an environment in which survival and spiritual practice coexist. Medical care, though rudimentary, is constantly applied. Frostbite, respiratory illness, and minor injuries are treated with careful observation, application of herbs, bandaging, and warming techniques. Sick monks receive priority for warmth, nutrition, and attention. The infirmary becomes a locus of strategic care, blending observation, routine, and improvisation. Survival here is an intricate balance. Physical care supports spiritual continuity, while careful labor prevents minor problems from becoming life-threatening. The psychological dimension of winter is equally significant. Monks endure long nights, limited daylight, and repetitive labor, yet the structure of daily rituals provides stability and focus. Prayer, study, and copying manuscripts occupy the hours while physical activity sustains the body. Brief social interactions, such as shared meals, coordinated fire tending, or the passing of messages, reinforce cohesion. Even humor, whispered anecdotes, or playful moments provide essential relief from monotony, ensuring that morale remains sufficient to sustain labor and discipline. Historically, winter exerted profound influence over monastic schedules. Manuscript copying, illumination, and scholarly study were often intensified in the colder months when travel, outdoor labor, or farming was restricted. Yet behind these intellectual pursuits lay constant vigilance, maintaining warmth, nutrition, water, and hygiene. The survival of the community was inseparable from these mundane acts. Monastic life was therefore a continuous integration of practical survival and spiritual discipline, with each reinforcing the other. By midwinter, the monks have internalized a rhythm of survival. Every task, from stirring a pot of stew to inspecting firewood, from carrying water to checking cellars, is performed with habitual precision. This repetition is not mindless. It is learned, tested, and refined year after year. It ensures not only physical endurance but also continuity of intellectual, spiritual, and communal life. The long, cold months demand resilience, patience, and attention to detail qualities cultivated deliberately within the monastery. And yet, even with such discipline and careful adaptation, winter remains unpredictable. Storms may isolate the monastery, illness can strike despite vigilance, and food or fuel supplies might falter. Every day is a negotiation with the indifferent forces of nature, a reminder that survival is never guaranteed. As you observe the monks moving through cloisters dusted with frost, you are left with a persistent thought. In these austere, repetitive routines, the quiet labor of survival is inseparable from the continuity of faith, scholarship, and community. But how fragile is that balance when nature's severity is absolute? As winter reaches its deepest point, the monastery is a study in endurance, structure, and quiet adaptation. The snow outside is thick and unbroken, the river frozen solid, and the air so cold that even stone walls seem to shiver. Inside, the monks have long since settled into the rhythm of survival. The deliberate tending of hearths, careful rotation of food stores, diligent water management, and the constant attention to warmth and hygiene. These daily, repetitive tasks, so easily overlooked, form the backbone of life in winter. They are the silent architecture of survival, as essential as prayer, study, or devotion. Food, carefully preserved and meticulously rationed, sustains both body and morale. Root vegetables, dried legumes, salted meat, and bread baked to last several days are prepared in communal kitchens and distributed with precision. Each meal is more than nourishment, it is a small triumph over scarcity and adversity. Mistakes in preparation or storage are rare because they carry immediate consequences. Spoilage or illness can imperil the entire community. Through repetition and careful observation, the monks have refined these practices over decades, embedding survival strategies into daily ritual. Fires burn steadily throughout the monastery. In refectories, dormitories, infirmaries, and kitchens, flames are monitored, stoked, and rationed. Too little heat risks frostbite or illness. Too much squanders precious wood. The smoke is guided through vents and chimneys, both for ventilation and to preserve warmth. Tending the fire is more than a chore, it is a skill that balances physical needs, resource limitations, and communal priorities. Survival, in this context, is a continuous negotiation, where even the simplest acts carry profound significance. Water remains a critical resource. Frozen wells and blocked channels demand constant attention. Monks chip ice, melt snow, and carefully carry water for drinking, cooking, and cleaning. Hygiene and health depend on these efforts. Disease can spread rapidly if water supplies are neglected. The repetitive nature of these tasks belies their importance. Each monk participates in maintaining this delicate system, ensuring that survival is a communal achievement as well as an individual responsibility. Even in silence and austerity, the monastery hums with coordinated labor. Monastic routines also integrate care for the vulnerable. Novices, the infirm, and the elderly receive priority in warmth, nourishment, and attention. Beds are positioned near heat sources, blankets layered carefully, and food distributed strategically. These practices reflect a sophisticated understanding of both physical and psychological needs in extreme conditions. Survival is not merely about individual endurance, but about the resilience of the community as a whole. The winter's harshness enforces cooperation, discipline, and careful planning, binding the monks together in ways that extend beyond ritual or doctrine. Intellectual and spiritual pursuits continue alongside practical survival. Manuscripts are copied, prayers are recited, and study persists even in the bitter cold. Yet every act of devotion or scholarship is framed by the demands of winter. Warmth must be maintained, food rationed, and water supplied. These constraints are not obstacles. They shape the rhythm of daily life, reinforcing patience, attentiveness, and mindfulness. In a sense, the harsh winter becomes a teacher, instructing the monks in endurance, resourcefulness, and resilience. Historically, monasteries across northern Europe faced these same challenges. Chronicles describe long periods of isolation, frozen rivers blocking travel, and snow so deep that only the most essential work could continue. Yet these communities endured because survival was embedded in every routine. Fire tending, food preservation, water management, and hygiene were practiced with the same discipline as prayer and study. The continuity of monastic life, its scholarship, devotion, and communal identity depended as much on these practical measures as on faith itself. By the final weeks of winter, the monastery emerges as a testament to disciplined endurance. Every monk has contributed to a system of survival honed over decades. Every task, no matter how repetitive or mundane, has ensured that the community remains intact, healthy, and functional. These quiet acts of labor, often invisible in historical accounts, are the true foundation of resilience. The monastery survives not by heroic acts, but by persistent, deliberate, and coordinated effort. And yet, even in this disciplined continuity, a question lingers. How many monasteries failed to survive harsh winters? How much of what we perceive as serene monastic life depended on careful, almost invisible, labor in the shadows of frost and snow? The endurance of these communities illustrates a profound truth about history. Survival is often built not on dramatic events, but on the patient, repetitive, and attentive acts that preserve life and knowledge through the harshest conditions. Story 7. Frozen Fields, Peasant Labor and Winter Agriculture. You step into a small peasant village in northern France during the late 13th century. Snow covers the fields, and the once fertile land is now frozen solid. The wind cuts across open plains, rattling wooden shutters and chilling those who venture outdoors. Yet life continues, albeit in a slower, more deliberate rhythm. Peasant families, accustomed to the merciless cycle of seasons, adapt their labor to the harsh demands of winter. Survival depends not on grand gestures or heroic feats, but on careful observation, preparation, and the repetitive, unglamorous work that sustains life through months of scarcity. Fields lie fallow beneath a crust of ice, yet the work of agriculture does not stop entirely. Farmers tend to livestock cattle, sheep, pigs, and poultry, ensuring animals are fed, watered, and sheltered. Hay is carefully rationed, water must be thawed, and bedding replaced regularly to prevent freezing and disease. Even minor negligence can result in the death of livestock, which could devastate a family's winter sustenance. You notice how these routines are painstakingly observed, often repeated several times a day, forming a rhythm that structures the entire household. Grain stores, vital for both bread and seed, are carefully monitored. Barley, oats, rye, and wheat are kept in pits, barrels, or granaries insulated against frost and pests. Families rotate supplies, inspect for mold or spoilage, and plan rationing to stretch through the harsh months. Each decision is deliberate. Use too much and you risk famine. Use too little and energy levels drop, compromising labor efficiency. The preservation of grains and other staples is an exercise in foresight and patience, demonstrating that the survival of peasant communities relies as much on careful planning as on physical labor. Winter also brings unique agricultural tasks. Soil preparation is impossible while frozen, but pruning trees, repairing fences, and maintaining tools are crucial. Villagers sharpen axes, mend plows, and repair carts for the coming spring. Small, repetitive labor ensures that when thaw arrives, the fields can be worked efficiently. Even indoor tasks spinning wool, weaving cloth, making candles, and repairing clothing are essential components of the agricultural cycle. These activities, although mundane, are indispensable for survival and long-term productivity. Water management remains a daily concern. Wells may freeze, streams may be blocked by ice, and snow must be melted for drinking and cooking. In larger villages, communal efforts are necessary. People coordinate to chip ice, transport water, and maintain access to livestock troughs. Failure in these routines can result in dehydration, poor hygiene, and increased vulnerability to disease. Every minor chore is therefore imbued with significance, as small miscalculations can accumulate into serious consequences. Food preparation and preservation are central to winter life. Root vegetables, salted meat, and preserved grains are staples. Families prepare stews, pottages, and porridges, often cooking in bulk to conserve both fuel and effort. Smoking meat, drying fish, and making cheese are routine winter activities, blending practicality with knowledge passed down through generations. You notice the subtle expertise in these processes. Timing, temperature, and placement of food in cellars or near hearths are calibrated to prevent spoilage, maximizing both nutrition and longevity. Fuel management, crucial for both cooking and warmth, dominates household routines. Firewood must be chopped, split, dried, and rationed carefully. Each family maintains an inventory, calculating how much will be needed for cooking, heating, and other tasks. Overuse risks running out before spring. Underuse leaves the household vulnerable to frostbite and illness. Attention to this mundane resource is as important as any act of bravery in the fields or barn, underscoring that survival often relies on careful planning and disciplined labor rather than extraordinary skill. Historical records and archaeological evidence reveal that these practices were widespread across medieval Europe. Winter labor, though uncelebrated in chronicles, was critical for community endurance. Villagers coordinated to ensure access to water, firewood, and food, passing knowledge across generations. What appears monotonous repetitive chores, tending livestock, monitoring supplies is, in fact, the backbone of rural resilience. The quiet, disciplined work of peasants ensured not only their survival, but the continuity of society during months when the land itself seemed inhospitable. And yet, even with careful preparation, uncertainty lingers. Severe frost can ruin stored crops, disease can sweep through livestock, and prolonged snow can isolate villages for days or weeks. Every decision, no matter how minor, carries consequences that ripple through the household and the broader community. You are left with a lingering thought. How did peasant families endure centuries of harsh winters, relying solely on observation, routine, and incremental labor, while every moment outside the fields or barns tested their resilience? The snow-covered fields are quiet now, but the work of survival continues relentlessly. Peasants, though temporarily removed from active planting or harvesting, engage in a complex web of tasks designed to ensure life during the harshest months. Every routine, feeding livestock, tending fires, preserving food, or managing water, is essential to prevent famine, disease, and exhaustion. In winter, survival is measured not by grand feats, but by consistent, repetitive labor that sustains both body and household. Livestock are the keystone of winter survival. Cattle, sheep, pigs, and chickens must be fed, watered, and protected from the cold. Hay, collected during warmer months, is rationed carefully. Ice is chipped from water troughs, and barns are reinforced with straw or boards to prevent drafts. Even minor negligence, wet bedding, frozen water, or overlooked feed can be deadly. as livestock are less able to endure harsh conditions than humans and provide essential nutrition, labor, and economic stability. The work of tending animals is continuous and exhausting, yet it is performed with methodical precision, reflecting the accumulated knowledge of generations. Stored grains and preserved foods are monitored closely. Barley, oats, and rye are checked for mold or pests. Salted meat is rotated near the hearth to maintain dryness. Root vegetables are periodically inspected and repositioned in insulated cellars or pits. These tasks, repeated daily or weekly, are crucial to prevent spoilage. A mismanaged supply can jeopardize the entire household. You notice the meticulous nature of these routines. Each barrel or basket is inspected, each portion measured, and every storage method tested against the uncertainty of frost, moisture, and time. Winter labor also includes preparation for the coming agricultural season. Tools are sharpened, plows repaired, and fences reinforced. Even indoor tasks such as spinning wool, weaving cloth, mending clothing, and making candles are vital components of survival. These seemingly mundane chores ensure that, when the snow melts and the soil softens, peasants can resume productive work immediately. The monotony of winter, therefore, masks a sophisticated form of preparation, strategic, disciplined, and essential for long-term endurance. Water management continues to demand attention. Wells may freeze or become clogged with snow, requiring constant maintenance. Communal coordination ensures that livestock and humans both receive adequate hydration. Villagers chip ice, melt snow, and transport water to kitchens and barns, performing labor-intensive tasks that are critical to survival. Without these repetitive efforts, dehydration, disease, and reduced labor efficiency would threaten the household's survival. You begin to see that the mundane, almost invisible labor of winter is what sustains life in a frozen landscape. Cooking and food preservation are continuous endeavors. Stews, pottages, and porridges are prepared over open fires, using minimal fuel to maximize warmth and efficiency. Smoking meat, drying fish, and storing root vegetables are carefully timed to prevent spoilage. Families learn to balance immediate needs with long-term storage, rationing calories while maintaining nutrition. These routines are repetitive and unglamorous, yet they embody an intimate knowledge of both food and environment, transforming scarcity into sustainability. Fuel management dominates household attention. Firewood is split, stacked, and dried with care, rationed between cooking, heating, and occasional indoor chores. Each log burned is measured against anticipated future needs. Too little heat risks frostbite and illness. Too much risks depletion of resources before spring. Every member of the household participates in these tasks, integrating labor, observation, and strategy into daily life. The survival of the community depends on such disciplined, methodical effort. Historical records reveal that peasant resilience in winter was remarkable. Villagers coordinated labor across households, shared resources, and adapted traditions to extreme conditions. They survived prolonged cold, scarcity, and isolation not through luck, but through repetition, observation, and careful management of the smallest details. Even in centuries without modern tools or technology, human ingenuity enabled continuity, productivity, and survival through months of monotony and hardship. Yet uncertainty is never eliminated. A sudden frost can ruin stored crops, a livestock illness can wipe out a herd, and prolonged snow can isolate villages for days. Every decision where to place a barrel of grain, how to ration hay, when to check wells carries weight. You are left with a lingering thought. How did these communities, dependent on observation, routine, and unglamorous labor, survive winter after winter, century after century, when every small miscalculation could be catastrophic? As winter begins to wane, the frozen fields gradually soften under the weak sunlight of late February. Snowdrifts shrink, Rivers begin to trickle, and the daily routines of survival start to shift toward preparation for spring planting. Yet the lessons of winter linger. The labor-intensive months have left imprints on every household. Knowledge of resource management, skill in observation, and discipline in repetition. For peasant communities, surviving winter was not about heroics, but about endurance, foresight, and the meticulous attention to details that most historical accounts overlook. Livestock, carefully maintained through the cold months, are still central to life. Those animals that endured frozen nights and scarce fodder now provide milk, wool, and labor for plowing. Farmers inspect each animal for signs of frostbite, malnutrition, or injury, adjusting care routines to restore strength. The survival of these animals determines the productivity of the household for the year ahead. In this way, winter labor and careful attention to small, repetitive tasks have a direct impact on spring yields, linking survival to agricultural prosperity. Stored grains and preserved foods are finally replenished with early spring foraging or new harvests of root vegetables stored in insulated pits. Families review what survived, noting which preservation techniques were most effective. Lessons are passed along. Which barrels remained mold-free, which storage pits resisted freezing, which methods of rationing proved sustainable. This reflection, grounded in practice rather than theory, becomes an essential part of intergenerational knowledge transfer. Winter labor teaches vigilance, patience, and adaptability skills that are as valuable as physical strength. The household itself emerges as a finely tuned survival unit. Every member from children to elders has contributed to sustaining life. The repetitive, seemingly boring tasks of feeding animals, tending fires, rotating stored food, and monitoring water have ensured that no household succumbed entirely to winter's harshness. These coordinated routines reveal the hidden genius of peasant communities. Survival is achieved not through drama or sudden heroics, but through discipline, foresight, and cooperation, repeated day after day, week after week, month after month. Water management, previously a daily challenge, now supports early planting preparation. Wells and streams thaw, but the memory of careful ice chipping, snow melting, and water rationing informs ongoing practice. Villagers have learned to anticipate scarcity, plan for extreme conditions, and integrate survival into everyday routines. These practices, mundane as they may seem, represent centuries of accumulated knowledge and cultural adaptation, forming the backbone of medieval rural life. Fuel and fire management leave a lasting impression as well. The careful rationing of wood, the skillful tending of hearths, and the prioritization of heat for humans and animals alike demonstrate the critical intersection of labor, planning, and environmental awareness. Without these repeated, unglamorous acts, survival through winter would have been impossible. The quiet genius of the peasant household lies in its ability to integrate human skill and natural resources into a seamless survival system. Historically, winter shaped peasant society profoundly. Harsh seasons reinforced communal cooperation, established routines of labor, and passed essential survival knowledge across generations. The continuity of rural life, including social cohesion, agricultural expertise, and family stability, depended on mastering the mundane challenges of winter. The heroic tales of medieval life often overlook this. Yet the survival of peasant communities through decades of frost and scarcity was arguably one of the greatest human achievements of the period. And yet, even at the edge of spring, uncertainty remains in the memory of villagers. Each household survived by degrees, and every miscalculation could have meant disaster. You are left with a final thought. The endurance of these communities was not shaped by chance or fortune, but by the persistent, repetitive, and disciplined labor that